Welcome to the Kyle Olson Show. I'm so glad you're with me today. We have a great show ahead. Back in June, white celebrities who wanted to appear woke temporarily gave their social media platforms to black women in a campaign they called Share the Mic. Well, I thought this was largely patronizing, especially since it was gone as quickly as it came. I thought, that's an interesting idea. There's so much negative news out there as the left constantly plays the victim and positions America as the oppressor and is literally trying to burn our country, our history, and our ideals down to the ground. Maybe we should feature some uplifting messages. Here are some black Americans all those woke white leftists probably wouldn't share the mic with. We at the Kyle Olson Show wanted to amplify these incredible voices. Because you know what, patronizing woke white liberals, you don't need to share the mic. Anyone with a cell phone, a social media account, can be seen and heard by anyone. That is, of course, unless Google, Facebook, and Twitter censor you. But we'll get to that later. Earlier this month, Cathy Dodson spoke to the Wichita Falls, Texas City Council during a debate over a Confederate monument in the city. Here's a portion of what she said.
So, speaking as a black person living in the city, I can honestly tell you the black folks in Wichita Falls don't care one way or another about that monument. That's the reason they're not here. They don't care. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. In 1980, I found myself living in the Ben Donnell projects on Lincoln Street. A single mother on welfare, having to decide what to do about feeding myself and my son. I couldn't do both at the same time. I had to get on food stamps. But I worked and got better at my job. One of the proudest moments was when I walked into the welfare office and told them, I don't need these food stamps anymore. I can feed myself and my son. Fast forward 38 years. I have retired from another job. I own 17 homes right here in Wichita Falls. Drive part-time for Halcon and run a bed and breakfast. I have made a success out of my life through hard work and perseverance. I want you to know that my success came in and happened in spite of that rock sitting in the front yard of Memorial Auditorium. That monument is just a rock. It's not good. It's not bad. It don't have the ability to be a racist. And it don't have control over anybody. It's just a rock. The issue of removing the statue is a distraction. It's an excuse to dismantle this city. If it comes down, there will be something else and something else and something else and something else to please these terrorist young folks. If Black Lives Matter, then instead of focusing on this rock, let's focus on the black men sitting on the curb in front of Faith Mission every day. Let's make them more self-sufficient. If Black Lives Matter, then you would help black people in the area of their need, like paying the rent, keeping food on the table, paying the electric bill in this 100-degree heat. That would be more beneficial. These white folks, outsiders, yelling and making their remarks in the street that Black Lives Matter, but you ain't doing nothing about it but opening your mouth and running your mouth. That's all they doing. That's all those outsiders is doing. Your white BLM members is tearing down the city or wants to tear down the city for their own political agenda. And you got your little black sheeps tagging along behind you. Bad, bad black sheep, have you any wool? Do you have what it takes to ask the question as to why are you following behind these folks trying to bring division and tear down Wichita Falls? These are college-educated people protesting that monument. Can they spend their time instead teaching financial literacy to black people and other minorities? Okay, it makes me mad for a movement to use black people as an excuse for their own political agenda to tear up and tear down. Wherever Black Lives Matter goes, they leave a trail of destruction. Let me say this before I run out of time. I come from welfare to fair and well with that monument in place. Actually, from welfare to millionaire. And never once thought that monument was holding me back.
What a compelling American success story. Here is Clay County, Florida Sheriff Darryl Daniels at the end of June when the Republican National Convention was still scheduled to occur in Jacksonville.
Lawlessness, that's unacceptable in this country. Lawlessness, that's unacceptable in Clay County. And if you threaten to come to Clay County and think that for 1 second that we'll bend our backs for you, you're sadly mistaken. I know what happens when lawlessness prevails. And in this day and time, God is raising up men and women, just like the folks you see standing behind me, who will have strong backbones and will stand in the gap between lawlessness and the good citizenry that we're sworn to protect and serve. So you can threat all you want. You can say, hey, let's go to Clay County, or let's go to some other peaceful county where their problems don't exist, or not so much like across this country, where relationships are great and not strained, and where the people support their sheriff and support the men and women who wear the uniform. And you'll have something waiting on you that you don't want. Yes, we'll protect your constitutional rights as long as you remain under the umbrella of peaceful protest or peaceful march. But the second that you step out from up under the protection of the Constitution, we'll be waiting on you. And we'll give you everything you want. All the publicity, all the pain, all the glamour and glory for all that 5 minutes will give you. Is it a threat? Absolutely not. But somebody has to step up in front of the camera and say, enough is enough. Tearing up Clay County, that's not going to be acceptable. And if we can't handle you, you know what I'll do? I'll exercise the power and authority as the sheriff, and I'll make special deputies of every lawful gun owner in this county. And I'll deputize them for this one purpose, to stand in the gap between lawlessness and civility. That's what we're sworn to do, and that's what we're going to do. You've been warned.
In mid-July, U.S. Senate candidate John James posted this fantastic ad titled Storyteller. It's a conversation between he and his dad, and it opens with John's kids sitting with their grandfather reading a book.
My dad, the storyteller. He told me how the son of a slave became a sharecropper, the son of a sharecropper became a mason, and the son of a mason became an entrepreneur.
So you were listening. That's our family story. I drilled it into his hard head.
Yes, sir, you did. And I'm proud to teach my sons that this is the only country where you can go from slave to senator in 4 generations and from poverty to prosperity in 1.
Now don't mess up this race.
We're John James, and we approve this message.
There are literally millions of amazing stories just like these throughout America. And it's only possible in America. It would behoove Republicans to feature incredible people like this, not celebrities, during the campaign, because these are inspiring stories the average person can relate and aspire to, and classic American values to which the majority of this country still subscribes. And it's these values, I believe, President Trump has furthered during his time in the White House. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a compelling black voice we lost this week, Herman Cain, an amazing entrepreneur, patriot, and American success story. This is the Kyle Olson Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Kyle Olson Show. Big tech has been all over the news this week. That is, if you were able to see what they didn't hide. Joining me now to break down what happened this week and what it means for the election and the future is Alam Bakari, my colleague at Breitbart News. So, Alam, there was a huge sort of showdown in the House of Representatives this week with big tech. Breitbart was a part of that. And the instances of Breitbart being censored on Facebook, Google, etc., was a part of that. So talk about, I know you've done some research and some reporting on what has happened with Breitbart, specifically related to Google. So talk a little bit about what you found.
So we've been looking at traffic from Google searches to Breitbart and our general visibility on the Google search engine. Obviously, the market leading search engine owns over 90% of the market. There's no real alternative. And what we found is really striking. Since 2017, shortly after Trump's inauguration, Breitbart's visibility on Google search, that's, the amount of times people see Breitbart links, that has declined on average by 99.7%. That's not an exaggeration. So almost a 100% decline from where we were in 2016 and the run-up to that election. We've also seen that with the recent Google search update, traffic to Breitbart from searches for Joe Biden and Biden has gone to zero. There was a regular pattern before that. The traffic went up and down as you'd expect. Now it's zero. I don't think this is a coincidence. We've seen in the past leaks from within Google showing that they maintain search blacklists. They even call them blacklists inside the company, and they use those on YouTube. And Sundar Pichai even admitted that they have certain blacklists for Google's main search engine as well. We also saw that leaked footage from after the 2016 election from inside Google showing executives in complete panic mode over Trump's election. They had no idea how it happened. We saw Kent Walker, one of their executives, talking about how he wants to make the populist movement a blip in history. So they've revealed their agenda. We know they're rabidly anti-Trump. And now we're seeing the results with this massive decline in search visibility for Breitbart.
But during that hearing, the Google CEO, he said there's no agenda. There's no bias. We're not manipulating anything. Do you believe that?
Not at all. It doesn't add up whatsoever. They'll always use plausible deniability, introducing these general algorithm changes. But what we've seen from Google and Facebook is after these changes, conservative websites and conservative figures always get hit the hardest. And that's not even before we start talking about all the prominent Trump supporters who've been banned outright from these platforms. We've looked at Breitbart's SEO scores, that ranks, the quality of your website. And it's actually ahead of CNN in some cases. And that's based on Google's own SEO analysis tools as well as third-party tools. So that doesn't explain the decline. Volume of interest in political news has only gone up since 2016, so that doesn't explain the decline either. Volume of articles, steady or increased, that doesn't explain the decline. So it's clearly, all the SEO experts we've talked to say this is clearly something manual. There's manual manipulation going on here. This doesn't happen by accident.
So leftists would just say, well, Breitbart's just unhappy because they're losing traffic. And when you lose traffic, you lose revenue. But pull out to sort of a broader, more of a philosophical perspective here and talk about if this is happening to Breitbart, what does that mean in terms of what these big tech companies are able to do in shaping what information people are receiving?
Well, one thing I'll say is on the traffic point, Breitbart's organic traffic has never been stronger. We're regularly ranked in the top one or two news websites in the US by Amazon-owned Alexa's web rankings. So despite the censorship from Google, our traffic is doing quite well. And that's another reason why Google's allegation that this is just an accident, this is organic, must be false, because Breitbart has not declined in popularity. Readers still like it. So it should be ranking highly on Google. But to your point, this is about more than just traffic, more than just clicks and, ad revenue. It's also about American democracy. Google has the ability to shut down any links to negative coverage about Joe Biden during an election year. This is a company that controls 90% of the search market. They have more power than any other entity over the flow of information on the web. And that's an extraordinary amount of political influence to have with zero oversight, zero legal checks and balances.
Well, and I took that when you posted that, the graph on Twitter, I took that personally because I was hired to cover the Biden campaign. And so to see how that just, it was like a cliff. It was not a gradual decline. It was overnight. Breitbart searches for Joe Biden on Google did not produce any Breitbart results. And that is staggering. So, and one of the things that I think Jim Jordan was attempting to get at was Google, they were in the bag for Hillary Clinton. They wanted to get Hillary Clinton elected. They did not like Donald Trump. And he was attempting to get the Google CEO to say on the record that they would not do what they did in 2016 in 2020. And so people will sort of dismiss that and say, well, he's just shilling for Donald Trump and he just wants to support Donald Trump. No, it comes down to a massive corporation that has a monopoly, largely has a monopoly on what information people are receiving, and they're able to manipulate that into how people think. You also wrote about an individual who was explaining how Google will attempt to and may actually successfully sway a significant portion of the voter population away from Donald Trump. Explain that a little bit.
So yes, this individual is Dr. Robert Epstein. He's a Harvard he's a Harvard-educated psychology professor, and he used to edit Psychology Today. He's actually a liberal. Used to be a big Clinton supporter, but he's an expert on the way search engines and search results can affect our political decision making. And he found that biased search results are able to bypass our natural critical faculties when assessing whether a source is biased or not, because we don't assume that a list of links on a website is going to be biased in any way. We think the links themselves might be biased, the stories, but not the actual list. So he found that Google could, if they wanted to, shift up to 10% of undecided voters towards the Democrats in the Democratic candidate in 2020, which is an extraordinary amount of votes and could easily swing the election.
Right. And so in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, et cetera, where, people are predicting, despite what the polls show, people are predicting that there will be razor-thin margins one way or the other, to have 10% of those voters influenced and swayed by how, algorithms work, I think is really significant. It was interesting also in that hearing to see how the Democrats were going after these various CEOs. My guess is that their remedy for what is going on is probably different than the Republicans. Alan Bakari, senior tech correspondent at Breitbart News. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Kyle.
This is the Kyle Olson Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Kyle Olson Show. Last week I had Eric Isaki on the program to talk about why he's running for Congress in the 11th District, which covers portions of Wayne and Oakland counties. Joining me today is Carmelita Greco, who is also running to ultimately take on Congresswoman Haley Stevens in November. So Carmelita, first of all, thanks for joining me, but why are you running for Congress?
Well, I'm running for Congress because I'm concerned about what's happening in our nation right now. Churches being closed, mandatory lockdowns, silencing speech, riots, and really what I believe is an overall global socialist agenda. I'm a mother of three, and I don't want my kids to grow up in a socialist America that will affect their freedoms and affect them to be higher taxed.
So what are some ways that you see we're sort of moving towards a socialist America?
Well, I think we can see this right now. I mean, what we see is 60% of our youth, if not more right now, believe that socialism is the right way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just had many conversations with, as a former financial consultant, some of my clients were fleeing Venezuela, and I heard their stories and also personal friends from Bulgaria and Eastern Europe, and the type of suppression that happens under socialism, as well as economically, how it affects the economy when the government tries to take over personal business. I think we're seeing a level of that happen right now with the COVID lockdowns. So it's the government ultimately controlling some of our daily activities and how we run business, deciding what businesses are essential and what businesses are not essential.
So why do you think kids, you mentioned Venezuela and what's happening there, and I can pretty much guarantee you students, whether it's in K-12 schools or colleges and universities, are not learning about what's going on in Venezuela. So do you think that the students today, it's a matter of ignorance, or they're sort of being sold this bill of goods in schools that, communism and socialism and, all of those things, that's the way to go? What is the root of it?
Absolutely. I think it's in school, and it's also through our media. They're being pushed, I believe, an agenda that's a globalist socialist agenda. And the media has put a color coding over socialism. And what we see is that socialism has caused the deaths over 100 million people. So they're not telling people the truth. They're not talking about what's happened when freedoms are suppressed under socialism.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting half truth, half of the story. So they're saying, oh, well, we'll get education paid for, we'll get health care, but they're not understanding the full story and how the oppression that happens when the government takes over private businesses.
Right. So Eric Kiyosaki sent out a mailer claiming that you're a fake Republican and anti-Trump. What's your response to that?
Yeah, actually, I think he sent out 4 of them, and probably totaling $60,000. But really, Eric Kiyosaki, he's using lies and manipulation because he doesn't want to run on his own merit, and that's really what I'm seeing. This is my first time even running in the political realm, and this is exactly why good people do not run, because it's lies and manipulation that other candidates put out. I was leading in the polls and running a strong, honest campaign. And it's these kind of attacks that come towards somebody like myself that's running a strong, honest campaign. So to me, it shows his character. It shows that he's willing to do anything it takes to win and is losing a level of his integrity. I'm more concentrating on the issues, and that's the kind of candidate that I am.
Are you anti-Trump?
Absolutely not. I voted for President Trump in 2016.
How would you say you compare to President Trump in terms of stances on the important issues?
Well, as a financial consultant, I'm a strong voice for the economy. I believe in cutting taxes. He's done an amazing job with cutting corporate taxes down to I think 21%. I'm a biblical conservative. He's been a strong voice for families. He's been a strong voice for pro-life, and just also a champion for religious freedom all over the world, even in China. Mm-hmm. I'm also somebody that's had a small business, unlike Eric Kiyosaki, where I have employed people and I've had a business.
Mm-hmm. If you were elected, and I talked to Matt Boyle, one of the editors at Breitbart News last week, about sort of a breakdown of all of the districts that President Trump won in 2016 that are currently held by Democrats, and the Michigan 11th is one of those districts. And so the numbers that we ran through, I think, is really sort of positive in terms of the prospects for Republicans to retake the majority. So if you were in the majority in Congress, and you were able to help President Trump, but you also, have your own initiatives, what would some of those initiatives and focuses be if you were in the Congress?
Well, I would like to pass a freedom bill. Right now, you have people that are social media that is oppressing our freedom of speech. So I think it's very important to secure our constitutional freedoms. I'm against mandatory vaccines, which I've seen that Mr. Kiyosaki has wrote an article that he's very pro-vaccine, and he also has not signed the Michigan for vaccine choice, there was a questionnaire that went out. He did not sign this questionnaire, and it gives voters the ability to know where he stands on vaccines. So I'm against mandatory vaccines, but Asaki's not being honest about it. I really also do not agree with mandatory masks as well. And people are being fired right now for sharing their political views. Those are all issues that I would tackle in a freedom bill. That's one of my top issues. But also, I'm a strong advocate for business and empowering entrepreneurs. I would love to bring manufacturing and trade back into high schools. I think students need other options, and they're not getting that right now.
So let's take two aspects of that freedom bill. There was a hearing this week in the House, in the Judiciary Committee, on with big tech, and it was Facebook and Amazon, and Twitter wasn't there for some reason, but others were. Google was another one, and there's a major concern on social media, but then also on Google, with censorship, whether it's silencing voices that are sort of contrarian opinions to the progressive mindset, or it's just sort of troublemakers like Breitbart, for example. What role do you think the Congress should play in all of that?
Well, we need to make sure that there's fair speech and that freedom of speech is not censored. I believe any public traded company should make sure that that they're not censoring free speech. So I think we can ultimately protect freedom of speech by enacting a law that would prevent censorship on these large social media platforms.
Well, and it seems to me, because what you'll hear from Zuckerberg and the others is they say, well, we think that there shouldn't be terrorist activity. Well, obviously. And they say that there shouldn't be, harassing or threatening activity. But those sorts of things are already outlawed. So it seems to me if those platforms would simply follow the law and not create their own rules, which, tend to go against conservatives and not progressives, it seems like that's the way to go. And so would you envision regulations from, say, the Trump administration or, potentially a Biden administration? Or do you think that should be codified in law?
I would say certain regulations just to ensure. One of the things that's happening right now are the fact checkers. You have something that's posted, and if it doesn't agree with the liberal agenda, they send a fact checker to debunk the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the same, actually, Asaki sent the same thing to me. He had the Free Press that was clearly siding with his point of view, and sent a fact checker that said, hey, we're siding with Asaki on this. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important that in order to have freedom of speech and in order to get to the truth, you need to limit these fact checkers. So I think a level of law regulation around that.
Well, and of course, the Detroit Free Press is not exactly a bastion of conservatism. So
exactly, it's not. And I think any candidate that's endorsed by the press, by the local press in general, like Asaki was endorsed, you really have to understand that they're not a true conservative.
And then
if you're getting endorsements by liberals, you're not a true conservative.
Right. Carmelita Greco, she will be on the ballot this Tuesday in the 11th district, in which covers portions of Wayne and Oakland counties. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
This is the Kyle Olson Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Kyle Olson Show. Rebecca Friedrichs is the founder of For Kids and Country, author of Standing Up to Goliath, Battling State and National Teachers Unions for the Heart and Soul of Our Kids and Country, and a 28-year public school teacher who was the lead plaintiff in Friedrichs versus CTA, which was California Teachers Association. And let me just say, there are very few warriors in the school choice movement. Very few people who are willing to put up with the vicious brass-knuckle attacks from the unions, the people who claim to care about children. Very few people in the school choice movement that when I hear them speak, I stop to listen. Rebecca is one of those people, and I'm so glad that she's with me today. So thanks for joining me, Rebecca.
Thank you, Kyle. What a very gracious introduction.
So you wrote a piece. Thank you. So you wrote a piece in July in the Washington Times titled "How Public Schools Groom Kids for Sexual Predators Like Epstein and Maxwell." Of course, you're referring to Jeffrey Epstein. That's a pretty provocative charge. And let me read from a portion of what you wrote. Healthy Teen Network, a coalition of over 180 sexual and reproductive health justice organizations, including the CDC, Planned Parenthood, and SICUS, whose motto is Sex Edge for Social Change. Their collective call to action demands funding and legislation for their brand of sex education, which they assert is a human right. So how would you describe their brand of sex education?
Well, their brand of sex education is child abuse, plain and simple. Here's what they do, Kyle. They, the teachers' unions in particular, and by the way, they don't deserve the name teachers' unions. They're actually Marxists who are posing as teachers and posing as unions. So it's really important for people to understand that. Loving teachers like myself would never, ever do these hurtful things to children. And we have been overrun and brutalized by these unions who claim to represent us and don't. So what they do is they support very far left candidates, and those candidates pass laws to bring something called comprehensive sexuality education into our schools. This is going on worldwide. The World Health Organization is involved, the United Nations involved. And so comprehensive sexuality education, or CSE, is the gateway to some very abusive curriculum. I'm just going to read to you a little bit of a lesson that I highlight in that piece that's on the Healthy Teen Network. Healthy Teen Network, this organization, works with all of the different publishers who bring comprehensive sexuality education into our schools and who work with these unions. So this lesson on the healthyteennetwork.org site, which by the way is a non-secure site, which concerns me because children are being led to this site. Mm-hmm. The lesson's called 5 Tips for Your Sexual Health During COVID-19. It's taught by a, quote, expert, Ella Dorval Hall, who is a 2018 college graduate in environmental studies. She's not really a sex health expert. Her 5 tips for our kids are that they should be involving in sexting, and she gives them a direct link to a website that teaches the children 54 different sexting ideas, and they are absolutely pornographic, and they even suggest that children get involved in threesomes. Her second suggestion to our kids is that they engage in solo sex or masturbation, and she actually asks them, you don't know, you have questions about this, you don't know how to do it? No problem, here's how to masturbate. And there's a link that the kids can follow. Then her third thing is that they should be looking at pornography, and she asks them, are you interested in watching porn? And she provides a porn literacy toolkit and other links. And then she tells our children, number 4, that they should date yourself. And number 5, that they should go online and interact with, quote, sex experts. And she actually gives them links to 5 different supposed sex experts who will show these kids how to use sex toys and give them, this is a quote off her page, how to use sex toys and tips for dirty talk. And when you follow these links, which I was horrified to do, they lead you to more and more links, and they lead you to these quote unquote educators who push comprehensive sexuality education, and it is 100% child abuse and grooming children for sexual predators.
So what sort of ages are we talking about here?
Well, that's the troubling thing. Comprehensive sexuality education has been pushed in our public schools for all ages. So most of the laws around it state that they should teach CSE in middle school and high school. However, there is nothing that stops any district from moving it down as early as kindergarten. In addition, when you look at the law, particularly the law in California called the California Healthy Youth Act, people can look that up. It is an example of the laws that they're trying to push in all states. In that law, schools are forced to teach the gender ideology at all ages. So from preschool all the way on up. Why? Well, they claim that this is anti-bullying, that you're supposedly protecting children from being bullied. But the truth is what's actually happening is teachers and parents are being bullied, children are being bullied, and children are being taught as early as 4 years old, oh, well, your parents didn't know your gender when you were born, so they assigned you a gender, and you'll figure out your gender someday from this unending number of genders. And so children they're totally confused, and they're losing their identities, they're losing their faith. It's unbelievable, Kyle. And it's being pushed by a very powerful coalition and these folks that call themselves teachers unions. And teachers need to be aware that their union dues are being used to push this humongous attack on children, on families, and on our Judeo-Christian virtues, and on our culture, and on America itself.
So what these schools are doing by way of these various organizations is they are setting kids up to be groomed and to be exploited and to be trafficked by predators. And they may not think that they're doing that. They may not realize that they're doing that, but that's exactly what's happening. And to your point about the strength of this organization, this Healthy Teen Network, you write that their strategic plan states that, quote, by 2020, Healthy Teen Network will work in all 50 states, U.S. territories, and the District of Columbia. So this organization will be working nationwide in pushing this sort of thing. And this is what is so frustrating to me as a parent and as someone who, looks into this sort of thing. Parents and I think grandparents, they think about the lessons that they may have had in schools, and it was, reproduction. And it was not all of this craziness that's being taught to kids who, they can't understand it. They don't understand their bodies. They're not developed, etc. They don't know how to handle all of this. And so the example that you gave, what is happening is this resource is setting kids off in a direction to be exploited online and groomed and trafficked. That's what's happening. Now, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say you are exactly right. And what families need to be aware is when the schools, and like I said, California is the example, but they're all following suit. All the states, even Texas is having trouble. Tennessee is having trouble. So even conservative states, and the reason is because the teachers unions, what they did was focus on school boards and focus on precise, specific leaders throughout different states who are pushing this nightmare into our schools. And so people need to be aware. They might get a letter coming home saying, oh, we're going to learn about the sex ed. Well, the letter's never going to tell you what's really going on. And so many people think precisely what you just said. Oh, it's what I learned when I was a kid. No problem. Whatever you do, don't allow your children to be a part of these lessons, and beware. They're showing up in every single subject, at every single grade level. If you have an activist, quote unquote teacher, an actual activist that's been planted in our schools by these unions, your kids are never safe. My best advice is pull your kids out of the public schools. But parents beware, teachers beware.
Rebecca Friedrichs is founder of For Kids and Country. She was in the classroom for 28 years, and she has the battle scars to show it. Where can people support your organization and find more out about you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Hopefully our website's back up. I was on Glenn Buck's show this morning and our website was attacked and went down, but hopefully we can get that back up soon. The website is forkidsandcountry.org. If you go on and you can't get there, please keep trying. forkidsandcountry.org. They can also find me on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter For Kids and Country. And they can find my book on Amazon. It's Standing Up to Goliath.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you so much for joining me today. For more of my work, go to Breitbart.com or find me on Twitter, Kyle Olson 4. Use the same handle for Parler, Kyle Olson 4, KYLEOLSON, and the number 4. This is The Kaya Olson Show.